Before you pass judgment on me, let me take you back and explain how I ended up here. On my 62nd birthday, I thought I was simply going out for lunch. I wore my favorite sweater, even took the time to fix my hair. But instead of a celebration filled with cake and laughter, I found myself handed a suitcase and left behind. That was only the beginning. If you believe betrayal only comes from strangers, just wait until it wears your last name. Stick around until the end and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. They say a mother's love is unconditional, patient, forgiving, and eternal. I wholeheartedly believe that. I lived it. I was there for Brandon, my only son, through every scraped knee, every sleepless night, and every school play. I never missed a moment. So when I woke up on my birthday, my chest fluttered with anticipation, that familiar warmth of hope filling me up. 62 years old, alone in my modest house in Dayton, Ohio, but still hopeful. Brandon hadn't called much recently. He'd said work was crazy and that things at home were tense with his wife. But surely, today would be different. I made pancakes, his favorite, and even set 2 plates. By noon, I was still alone. My heart sank a little, but I refused to let the sadness take over. I checked my phone repeatedly, reread old texts, just searching for some connection. Then, in the afternoon, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Brandon standing there, wearing that boyish grin he always had when he wanted something. "Happy birthday, Mom," he said, holding out a small bouquet from the grocery store. I forced a smile through the sting in my chest and hugged him tightly. "You came?" I asked, my voice shaky. "Of course," he replied, patting my back awkwardly. "Get dressed. I made lunch reservations." I didn't even question it. I grabbed my coat, a little purse, and slipped on the shoes that always pinch my toes, but looked nice. I felt giddy, like a teenager going to prom. But instead of heading toward the city or a restaurant, we drove to a place with a long driveway lined by maple trees, whose leaves had turned a golden red. As we approached, my stomach twisted. Willow Pine Senior Living Facility. "Brandon, what is this?" I asked, my voice shaky. He cleared his throat. "Mom, we need to talk. It's not safe for you anymore. You live alone, and with your memory lapses." "What memory lapses?" I snapped, my voice sharp. He kept talking, ignoring my interruption. "I found a great place. It's safe, comfortable. You'll be with people your age. There will be activities." I laughed bitterly. It wasn't a real laugh at all. "You're kidding me. You brought me here on my birthday." He got out of the car. "Let's go inside." But I refused to move. That's when he opened the trunk. My suitcase was already packed. I stared at it, frozen in place. "You went through my things?" He sighed, frustrated. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Inside, everything felt like it was frozen in time. The smiling faces at reception, the smell of antiseptic and overcooked vegetables. Brandon handed over papers, legal documents, a transfer of power of attorney, my name, his signature. Done. I didn't cry. Not yet. They led me to a room with beige walls, an adjustable bed, and a small window facing a brick wall. My birthday gift. I sat on the edge of the bed, still wearing my coat, feeling the cold seep through my bones. No cake. No candles. Just silence. Hours passed. Finally, I opened the bouquet. It had wilted in the car. The flowers were as tired and faded as I felt. That night, I lay awake, listening to the soft rustle of nurses and the distant sound of a TV playing somewhere down the hall. The mattress was too firm, and the sheets smelled like bleach. I replayed every conversation I had with Brandon over the years. Last year, I spent countless hours looking back, trying to see the signs I had missed. I thought about all the times I said yes when I should have said no. The times I covered for him, loaned him money, and made excuses for him to others. I swallowed my disappointment because I loved him. But that night, something inside me cracked. It was something essential, something I hadn't even known I was holding on to. The next morning, I asked a nurse for my cell phone. She told me my son had taken care of it, disconnected the line because he said it was too confusing for me. It was at that moment I realized something that hit me like a wave. I wasn't here to be cared for. I was here to be erased. And if I didn't find a way out, they were going to succeed. But I wasn't as fragile as they thought. Not by a long shot. I stopped eating for 2 days. It wasn't a protest or a way to make a statement. I just couldn't stomach the food or the truth. There's something soul-shattering about being treated like you're no longer useful. It breaks a part of you that doesn't heal easily. I had raised a child, built a home, loved fiercely, and now I was just a room number, a patient chart. The nurses were kind for the most part, but kindness, when you're trapped, can feel like pity. They called me sweetheart and honey, as if I were 10 years old or 100. No one asked about my life before this place. No one cared what I loved. To them, I was just another elderly woman in slippers, struggling to remember things, even if I hadn't forgotten a damn thing. My roommate, Doris, spent most of the day sleeping and snoring all night. She didn't talk much, but when she did, it was about the people who hadn't visited her in years. I listened because I understood that ache of absence all too well. I did my best to keep my mind sharp. I watched the news in the common room, did the crossword puzzles they left in the hallway, and reread a book I had read twice before. But deep inside, I was sinking darker and deeper. Then, on the 4th day, I met Ruby. She wasn't even supposed to work that day. A nurse had called in sick, and Ruby, young with braids pinned up under her scrub cap and kindness in her eyes, filled in. She was checking my vitals when she looked at me and said, "You don't belong here." I was startled by her words, but she smiled. "Don't get me wrong," she said. "A lot of folks need help, and that's okay. But you don't seem lost." I blinked, surprised, as the sting of tears welled up in my eyes. We talked for a while, and when she asked about Brandon, I told her what I could without falling apart. She didn't just nod along, she really listened. Later that day, she came back with something in her hand. "This belonged to Mr. Henley," she whispered. "He was a resident who passed away last week. We found it tucked inside his Bible. No one claimed it. It's a lottery ticket, folded, a little yellowed, and dated 2 weeks ago." I chuckled, though it was dry and brittle. "And you want me to try my luck?" Ruby winked. "Hey, the world owes you something." At first, I didn't plan on doing it. It felt silly, but boredom and desperation make strange bedfellows. That night, when the hallway was quiet, I used one of the facility's ancient desktops in the lounge to type in the numbers. My hand froze. I scanned the page over and over, my eyes wide in disbelief. 1,000,000. I covered my mouth with both hands. My heart raced, and I looked around, but no one was there. The silence that followed was deafening. It wasn't joy that I felt, not at all. It was fear. Pure electric fear. If Brandon found out, if anyone found out, I couldn't even begin to imagine the consequences. I printed out the confirmation, folded it small, and tucked it inside my bra. The next day, I called Ruby aside. "I need to talk to someone privately," I said. "Someone legal." She didn't ask questions. She simply nodded, understanding. Ruby knew someone, a volunteer attorney who came by twice a month. I didn't know what would happen next, but I finally felt like I had a plan. Aaron was the one who helped seniors with their wills and other legal matters. I waited with my heart racing until he finally arrived that Friday. His name was Aaron, young, sharp, and most importantly, discreet. We met in the tiny break room, where I slid the lottery confirmation across the table and whispered, "Can you help me disappear?" His eyebrows lifted in surprise, but he didn't flinch. "We'll need to move fast," he said. The next hours blurred into one whirlwind of paperwork, notarizations, financial transfers, a new phone, and even setting up a temporary mailing address. Aaron contacted an independent financial advisor who helped set up a blind trust, making sure my name was nowhere to be found. Brandon would never see a cent. I signed a new will, leaving everything to charity, though the details were to remain undisclosed for now. Brandon had already signed away my life once. I wouldn't let him do it again. Ruby gave me a warm hug the night I left. "Don't forget us when you're free," she whispered. I didn't cry. I couldn't. I slipped away just before dawn, wearing clothes that weren't mine, carrying a duffel bag with only the essentials. They had all believed I was senile, broken, and alone. But I was about to become a ghost, one with $1,000,000 in hand. Let them search for me. They'd never see me coming. The bus ride out of Ohio was long, quiet, and cold. I sat near the back with my hood up, sunglasses on, clutching the duffel bag like it contained my very soul. In many ways, it did. I didn't know exactly where I was heading, but I knew I had to get far enough that no one could find me. Not Brandon, not his wife, not the lawyers he'd likely already contacted. Aaron had helped me purchase a modest house under a new trust name in rural Tennessee. It was far off the grid, yet livable. No cameras, no neighbors too close, just enough distance between me and the life I was leaving behind. When we crossed the Kentucky border, I finally exhaled. Freedom tasted different than I expected. It wasn't sweet. It was metallic like blood and fear. The house wasn't anything fancy. A single-story brick structure with chipped paint and a crooked mailbox, but it had a working heater, clean water, and most importantly, silence. Not the kind of silence you get in a nursing home, surrounded by people who've given up. This was the kind of silence that lets you breathe. For the next few days, I lived like a shadow. I cooked simple meals, walked to the mailbox, and sat on the porch wrapped in an old quilt, watching the wind carry dead leaves across the yard. I checked the news obsessively, half expecting to see my name in bold letters. Missing woman wins $1 million. Son claims mental instability. But there was nothing. Not yet. I kept the lottery ticket in a fireproof box under the floorboard of the hallway closet. Inside, I also tucked the new will, a burner phone, and a note addressed to whoever might find these items. Just in case. Then one morning, about a week after I left Willow Pines, the quiet shattered. A knock at the door. I froze. I hadn't told a soul where I was. Not a single person. I didn't even have a credit card linked to my name. My heart pounded in my chest like a war drum. I tiptoed to the window and peeked outside. It was just a delivery man. Groceries. Part of the arrangement Aaron had set up. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. That afternoon, curiosity got the better of me. I created a fake Facebook profile and searched for Brandon. There he was, smiling in his profile picture as if the world hadn't fallen apart. In his latest post, he wrote, "If anyone has seen my mother, Margaret Taylor, please contact me or the Dayton police. She's been missing for several days. We're worried about her safety." Beneath the post, hundreds of comments flooded in. Prayers, condolences, people praising Brandon for being such a good son. I laughed so hard I cried. They had no idea. None. But what truly broke me wasn't the post. It was the photo Brandon used wasn't recent. It was from 5 years ago, one of the last birthdays we celebrated together. I was wearing a sparkly party hat, and he had his arm around me. We looked happy, didn't we? How easy it is to perform love in pictures. But that night I couldn't sleep. I sat in the living room, staring at the dying embers in the fireplace. My thoughts spiraled, each one darker than the last. I remembered every time I had given Brandon money, every loan, every lie I'd let him tell. I remembered how he gaslit me, subtly, but enough to make me doubt myself. He'd say things like, "You already told me that," when I hadn't, or "You're forgetting more and more these days." At first, I thought I was just aging poorly. I thought it was my fault. But now I knew better. It wasn't me. It was him. He wanted me to question my own mind, so when he took control of my life, I wouldn't resist. Well, I was done being controlled. The next morning, I called Aaron from a burner phone. "I need you to update my will again," I said. He didn't ask why, just what changes. I knew what I had to do. "I want to make it clear," I said, my voice steady. "Brandon Taylor receives absolutely nothing. Not a dollar, not a keepsake, not a memory. Nothing." Aaron was quiet for a moment. "You're safe now, Margaret," he said softly. But I knew the truth. I wasn't safe yet. Not by a long shot. Deep down, I could feel it. Something was coming, and I needed to be ready for it. The first sign came in the form of a letter. It was plain, with no return address, tucked in with utility bills and junk mail. I almost missed it, but the weight of the envelope caught my attention. It was heavier than usual, more expensive. The moment my fingers brushed the paper, a sick feeling twisted in my stomach. Inside was a single sheet, photocopied, containing my signature, or what looked like it. Below mine were 2 other signatures, one from my late husband, Richard, and another from Brandon. The document was a loan agreement dated 12 years ago. It claimed to be a personal loan, taken out in both Richard's and my names. The bank's logo was real. So was the notary stamp. But I knew I'd never sign that paper. Never. I sank down onto the worn sofa, the letter trembling in my hands. The document had my handwriting, right down to the loop in the G of Margaret, but something about it didn't feel right. It was too clean, too practiced. Richard would never have hidden something like this. And Brandon, he'd never said a word. I pulled out the fireproof box, retrieved the older file folder Aaron had helped me compile, a collection of financial documents we had salvaged before I left. Inside, I found 3 more forms, each with my forged signature. A cold realization slid down my spine like ice. Brandon had been stealing from me and Richard for years. It explained so much, the strange tension in our final years together. Richard avoiding certain financial topics, the sudden shortage of money, and Brandon's constant emergencies while driving a brand new car every year. The quiet arguments Richard and I had at night, the canceled vacations, the bad investments I had blamed on aging, the market, and just bad luck. It wasn't bad luck. It was Brandon. All along. I didn't cry, not this time. Instead, I opened my laptop and began digging deeper. For the next 3 days, I pieced it all together. Brandon had falsified several loan documents using both Richard's and my social security numbers. The amounts varied, but others had quietly been rolled into debt collections. Richard must have covered most of it before he died, taking the shame with him. But one account, still active, had a ballooning balance of over $30,000. It had defaulted just 3 months before I was dropped at Willow Pines. I sat in the darkness of that little Tennessee living room, the glow of the screen lighting my face, my hands clenched so tightly my knuckles ached. This wasn't just betrayal. This was theft, fraud, a crime. I reached out to Aaron again. I have new information, I told him. Forged documents, loans. Brandon did it. He didn't flinch. I believe you, he said calmly. Do you want to press charges? Not yet. I wasn't ready. Not because I doubted myself. Those doubts were gone. I wasn't ready because I wanted Brandon to feel the weight of his actions. I wanted him to realize what he had done to me, to Richard, and to our family. He needed to know that no matter how far I ran, how hidden I became, he wouldn't get away with this. Not for long. It started with fear. The fear of silence, of not knowing what was coming next. I wanted Brandon to wonder if I knew. But the truth was, I wasn't hiding anymore. I was hunting. I began gathering every document I could, every account tied to my name, every old email, every financial notice Brandon had once sent on my behalf. I even contacted the old bank we used, requesting records under a legal pretext that Aaron helped me draft. Piece by piece, the puzzle started to form, and what it revealed made my blood run cold. Brandon had taken out a high-interest loan against the small business I once co-founded with Richard in the 80s, a catering venture we ran from our garage in the early years. He used that LLC, still technically active, to secure a double line of credit. And he signed it using Richard's name, 2 years after Richard had died. That wasn't just a moral failing. That was federal fraud. I saved everything to an encrypted folder, backed it up, and printed a copy to store in the box beneath the floorboards. I wasn't sure how long I had. If Brandon was as desperate as I suspected, and if he had even the slightest inkling that I had vanished with millions, he'd be coming for me soon. Have you ever looked at someone you've loved your entire life and realized you never truly knew them? That's what it felt like. Scrolling through pages of documents that tied my son to a trail of deceit so long and tangled, it made my stomach churn. The man I once rocked to sleep in my arms had grown into a stranger, and not just any stranger, but a dangerous one. By now, I had confirmed everything. Brandon had forged my signature, lied to banks, manipulated my late husband into covering for him, and worst of all, he had done it all behind the mask of a devoted son. But the darkest truth came through a simple search buried in a public database. With a little help from Aaron's access, I found it. Brandon Taylor, currently under federal investigation for fraudulent tax filings, embezzlement, and identity misuse. Identity misuse. That one hit hardest. I clicked on the case file, my hands trembling. The details were mostly redacted, but the accusations were clear. Brandon had been creating false identities, inflating incomes, falsifying deductions, and submitting returns to siphon money through refunds. Some of those identities were deceased. Some were elderly. Some were real people, including me. The IRS had flagged several returns filed in my name over the past 3 years. I had no idea. I stared at the screen, my mind spiraling. Had he planned to take my money from the beginning? Was this the reason he was so quick to shove me into a facility and shut down my phone? It wasn't concern. It was containment. He wanted to keep me silent, disoriented, and out of the way. I pushed away from the desk, pacing the narrow living room with one hand pressed to my chest to quiet the tremors. My own son had weaponized my identity, used my name as a tool for his schemes. And when the heat came down, he'd planned to put me away like a loose end in a messy story. Only now, I wasn't just a loose end. I was the one holding the thread. I didn't call the police, not yet. Instead, I started documenting everything. Every lie, every loan, every forged line on a piece of paper. I printed them, filed them in manila folders, and labeled them with dates. I began recording audio notes, not because I was scared of forgetting, but because I wanted my voice to be the one that told the truth. I made a decision, the kind of choice that would make me the last one in the room, if anything ever happened to me. I mailed a complete copy of the entire file anonymously to the Department of Justice. Not to make a statement, not yet, but to plant a seed. They would have the evidence. If something ever happened to me, they'd know exactly where to look. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that Brandon knew. I started noticing cars parked outside my house longer than usual, always in the same spots. Once a man knocked on the door, claiming he was conducting a neighborhood survey. I didn't open it. Instead, I watched him from behind the curtain, phone in hand. Every knock, every ring of the doorbell made me jump. Yet I didn't run. Not this time. I made another call to Aaron. We need to finalize the trust, I told him. And the will too. I want everything protected. He agreed, and we set it all up under my new name, surrounded by layers of legal insulation. If Brandon ever tried to claim assent, he'd be bounced out of every court in the country. But despite all the protection I could put in place, the emotional toll hit me hardest in the quietest moments. At night, I would lie awake, thinking of Brandon as a boy, his laugh, his scraped knees, the way he used to fall asleep on my chest. I remembered the teenage years when things started to shift, but I never gave up on him. The college calls, the sudden silences, the growing distance. How did I miss it? How long had he been slipping away while I kept holding on? Maybe that's the worst kind of betrayal, the one you watch unfold in slow motion, always hoping it's something else. But now I knew the truth, and I wasn't going to let him rewrite the end of my story, because for the first time in my life, I held the pen. Then the letter came. It was in a plain white envelope, no return address. But when I saw the handwriting, I knew instantly. Brandon had always written with sharp, slanted strokes, as if even his pen couldn't wait to be done with whatever he was writing. Inside was a single sentence. I know what you did, and this isn't over. I read it twice, 3 times. Then I laughed, not out of amusement, but because it was the exact kind of arrogance I expected from him. There were no please, no I miss you, or where are you? Just a threat, a warning. I folded the letter neatly and slid it into my growing folder of evidence. By now, I had been gone for almost 3 weeks. Brandon had launched a public campaign, acting the part of a heartbroken son, begging for information, giving interviews to local news stations, searching for his confused and vulnerable mother. It would have been comical if it weren't so chilling. And then, just as I feared, he made his move. A letter arrived from the county courthouse in Dayton, official, certified. I signed for it with trembling hands, sat down at the kitchen table, and opened it. Brandon had filed a petition to have me declared mentally incapacitated. I couldn't breathe. The document included statements from 2 people claiming I'd shown erratic and confused behavior over the past year. One was a former neighbor, the other a college friend of his, someone I barely knew. Brandon's lawyer had submitted audio clips too. Snippets of old voicemails I'd left when I was distressed, lonely, or simply venting. They had been chopped and edited to make me sound unwell, unstable. There was even a letter from a psychiatrist I'd never met, expressing concern over my disappearing and paranoid behavior. They wanted the court to freeze my accounts, seize control of the trust, and drag me back. It felt like the walls were closing in. The air felt like it had been punched from my lungs. Aaron arrived that same night. He read through everything with an unreadable expression. "We've got work to do," he finally said. "But, Margaret, you need to stay calm. You need to stay sharp. They're counting on panic." I nodded, too numb to cry. The next few days felt like a storm. Aaron contacted an experienced litigator to help us prepare. We gathered documents, video calls, financial logs, even a data journal to prove I had been of sound mind every day since I left. We scheduled an independent psychiatric evaluation. The doctor, a kind woman named Dr. Levine, came to the house and spent 3 hours with me. She asked about my childhood, my late husband, Brandon. I told her everything. She didn't pity me. She listened. She asked real questions. And when she left, she touched my hand and said, "You're the most lucid person I've seen this week." It felt like the first breath I'd taken in days. But still, the pressure mounted. News of the hearing leaked. The internet, which had briefly sympathized with Brandon's missing mother saga, began to shift. Questions arose. Why hadn't I contacted anyone? Was I unstable? Was someone else pulling the strings? The media loves a mystery, and Brandon knew how to feed them one. But I wasn't afraid anymore because now I had more than just proof. I had purpose. In the quiet of my small home, I began preparing a video statement. I didn't publish it yet, but I wanted to be ready in case they tried to silence me. I looked into the camera and said, "My name is Margaret Taylor. I am of sound mind, and I was betrayed by the person I trusted most." I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just told the truth because I knew what was coming. And this time, I wouldn't be the one on trial. The courthouse in Dayton hadn't changed since the last time I'd been there, years ago, when I had paid a parking ticket and sat in a room full of people hoping to forget their mistakes. Back then, I was a wife, a mother, someone who believed in giving second chances. Now I was the accused. Aaron had advised me to dress simple but strong, something that said, "I'm not here to beg. I'm here to be heard." I wore a navy blue coat with silver buttons, my husband's old watch, and a pair of sensible heels that clicked defiantly with each step through the courthouse halls. Brandon was already seated at the front of the courtroom when I arrived. He stood as I entered, performing his part perfectly. A mask of concern draped over his face. He even offered a smile, the kind that strangers might interpret as warmth, but I saw it for what it was. He was here to bury me. The judge, an older man with tired eyes, introduced the case regarding Margaret Taylor's mental competency. The words hung in the air like smoke. Brandon's attorney went first, a tall man with a polished voice and far too much confidence. He laid it out like a script. Margaret had gone missing. Margaret was behaving erratically. Margaret was possibly being manipulated. Margaret was a danger to herself and her finances. He introduced the psychiatrist's letter, the one from the doctor I'd never met, and presented the audio clips of me, edited and spliced like a horror reel. I listened to myself, sounding scattered, desperate, even unstable, taken completely out of context. I saw the judge's eyebrows rise. My hands clenched around the armrest. Then Brandon spoke. "Your Honor," he said, his voice trembling just the right amount. "I love my mother. I really do. This is the hardest thing I've ever done. But I believe she's being taken advantage of. She's not herself. She's lost." That's when I stood. "My turn, Your Honor," I said. The judge nodded. I walked slowly to the stand, pausing just enough to let the tension in the room build. I let the weight of my presence settle in the room before speaking. "My name is Margaret Taylor. I am 62 years old. I am not mentally impaired. I am not lost, and I am not anyone's victim." I opened my folder with precision, handing the judge a copy of Dr. Levine's full psychiatric report, signed, dated, and certified. The verdict was clear. Completely of sound mind, no signs of cognitive decline, emotionally stable. I saw the attorney's shoulders tense. Brandon's face twitched. Then I continued, my voice steady. "I have here, I said, lifting a second folder. A log of every phone call I made the week before I left. Receipts for the transfer of funds to a legal trust, clean medical records, and a signed affidavit from the attorney who helped me leave the facility, stating I was lucid, logical, and fully in control of my decisions. I paused, letting the room absorb the weight of what I'd presented. I also have something else, I added, but I won't be presenting that today. Not unless I need to. I didn't show the file, the one with every fraudulent signature, every stolen loan, every manipulated tax document Brandon had touched. That was my ace. Instead, I turned to the judge. He put me in a facility without my consent, took my phone, took my freedom, and now he wants to take what little I have left. My voice, my independence, my dignity. Don't let him. The courtroom was silent. Aaron sat beside me, still but unwavering. His eyes met mine, proud but not surprised. The judge leaned back in his chair, tapping the file with his thumb. I need time to review all documents and the medical evaluation. The court will reconvene in 2 weeks. 2 weeks. That was the time the judge had given us. But Brandon didn't waste a single day. Within hours of leaving the courthouse, he doubled down on his public campaign. The local news ran a new segment, Missing Mother Reappears in Court. Son Fears Exploitation. Brandon appeared on camera, eyes moist, his voice shaking just enough. I just want to make sure my mother is safe, he said. She's been through a lot. She's not thinking clearly, and I'm afraid there are people around her with bad intentions. I watched the broadcast from my living room, arms folded, jaw tight. There were no bad people around me. Just me. Just Margaret Taylor. The woman who raised him, who sacrificed, who forgave more than any mother should. And he had the audacity to paint me as a puppet. That was the moment I knew. The silent war I had declared in my heart was no longer enough. I needed to act. I called Aaron and asked him to come by. When he arrived, I handed him the sealed envelope with every document I had collected. The fraudulent loans, the forged signatures, the tax returns Brandon had filed under my name. Send it, I said. Not to the court, but to the Department of Justice anonymously. Aaron opened the envelope, flipped through the pages, and nodded. This will get their attention. I'm counting on it. But I wasn't done. That night, using one of my new aliases and a fresh online account, I made a sizable donation, $5 million, to a national nonprofit organization that protects elderly individuals from financial abuse. No name attached, just the transfer. Within a week, they launched a campaign using my case as a symbol. They didn't name me, but the message was clear. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. People started whispering, questioning, and sharing their doubts. How does a mother vanish and then reappear with money, only for her own son to try to lock her away? Comments flooded social media. Something's off with the son. Let her speak. Why hasn't anyone asked her side? I don't trust him. Brandon's carefully crafted image began to crumble. Then, a break I hadn't expected. A journalist from a major newspaper reached out to Aaron. She wanted to hear my side of the story. She promised discretion, no names, no photos, just the truth. I agreed. We met at a quiet cafe 2 towns over. I wore sunglasses and a hat. We sat in a corner booth, and she hit record letting me speak. I told her everything. About the facility, about being dropped there without warning, about Brandon taking my phone, my accounts, my dignity. I didn't mention the lottery, not yet. When she asked about the court case, I simply said he's trying to take control of my life. 2 days later, the story ran, Mother or Millionaire, the silencing of Margaret T. It didn't take long for the dots to connect. People online began speculating. Was the missing mother actually the anonymous donor? Was this why her son wanted her declared incompetent? More whispers, more doubts. And still I remained quiet. Because Brandon's downfall wouldn't come from an accusation. It would come from a reckoning. 2 days before the court reconvened, Aaron received a call from the Department of Justice. They had received our anonymous file, and they were opening a case. Brandon didn't know it yet, but while he was busy building a castle of lies in courtrooms and in front of cameras, I was setting fire to the foundation. The flames were growing higher. The second hearing felt colder, not because of the weather, even though the Tennessee wind had turned cruel that week, but because something had shifted in the air around us. Brandon walked into the courtroom looking less confident this time. His shoulders weren't quite as high. His lawyer whispered urgently as they took their seats. They'd seen the article. They'd felt the shift online. The cracks were showing. I sat calmly, my folder of documents neatly tucked in my lap. I wasn't afraid anymore. I was angry, not the kind of anger that lashes out, but the kind that sharpens into precision. This time we went first. Aaron opened with a statement that silenced the courtroom. Your Honor, he began, since the last hearing, we've completed a full independent psychiatric evaluation, submitted detailed financial logs proving Mrs. Taylor's independence and coherence, and discovered through legitimate public records that the petitioner, Mr. Brandon Taylor, is currently under federal investigation for multiple financial crimes, including identity misuse and tax fraud. He handed the judge a copy of the public case docket. Brandon's attorney jumped up immediately, protesting. That investigation has no bearing on. The judge held up a hand, silencing him. Sit down. The courtroom held its breath. Then came the real blow. Dr. Levine, my independent evaluator, took the stand. Calm, intelligent, and direct, she confirmed that I was not only mentally competent, but emotionally sound and fully aware of my decisions, including my choice to leave the nursing home. She's not only clear, Dr. Levine said, she's deliberate, thoughtful. There's no medical basis for any declaration of incompetence. I looked at Brandon then. His hands were gripping the table, so tightly his knuckles turned white. His mask, that carefully constructed facade of concern, was unraveling by the second. Aaron then presented our final piece of evidence, a timeline. It showed exactly when Brandon attempted to seize control of my accounts, and the evidence was clear. The way large withdrawals from my accounts coincided perfectly with the financial struggles of Brandon's failing business. Coincidence? Hardly. The judge reviewed everything in silence, absorbing the weight of the documents presented. Brandon was then given the opportunity to respond. He stood, his voice cracking as he spoke. My mother is sick. She's clearly being manipulated by someone. She wouldn't act like this unless she was confused or unstable. This isn't her. I stood up then, and I faced him directly. I am her, I said. The room went still. I am the woman who stayed up with you when you had the flu at age 6. The one who gave up vacations, pawned jewelry to pay for your college classes, and cooked your favorite meals even when I couldn't afford groceries for myself. I am her, and you left me in a facility like I was nothing. I turned to the judge. And now, Your Honor, I ask you to let me prove that I am not nothing. The judge leaned forward, steepling his fingers, and spoke slowly. Mrs. Taylor, based on the overwhelming evidence provided, your psychiatric evaluation, and the inconsistencies in the petitioner's claims, I am dismissing this case. Your financial accounts and personal autonomy are fully restored. This court recognizes you as competent and independent. I didn't cry, but my hands trembled slightly as I picked up my papers and walked out of the courtroom. Brandon didn't say a word as I passed. His eyes were wild, not with anger but with fear. He knew it was over, at least this part of it. But what he didn't know was that while he had spent weeks trying to prove I was unstable, I had been building something far more powerful than just a defense. A legacy. And I wasn't done yet. The phone call came just after midnight. Aaron's voice was tense, but steady. It happened. The DOJ opened formal proceedings. Brandon's name is on the docket. I didn't speak. I just sat there in the dark, staring out the window at the wind shifting the trees in the yard. A part of me had been waiting for this moment, but now that it had come, it didn't feel victorious. It felt inevitable. The next morning, the world caught up. The media swarmed. Brandon Taylor, son of the recently spotlighted elder abuse case, was now under federal investigation. My name wasn't mentioned, not directly, but the connections were too close to ignore. People remembered the missing mother, the court battle, the anonymous donor, the frail woman who disappeared but stood strong in court weeks later. Now, their perfect son was unraveling, and they wanted to hear from me. I stayed quiet for 2 days. I turned off the TV, ignored the phone. I cooked myself breakfast, watched the birds peck at the frostbitten yard, and sat with a pen in hand, writing letters I never intended to send. But silence wasn't justice. It was time to act. I reached out to Sarah, the journalist who had met me in secret weeks earlier. I told her I was ready to speak on camera. No aliases. No more shadows. We scheduled the interview for the following Friday, a national news feature. She asked if I was sure. I've never been more sure, I said. On the day of the interview, I dressed simply. Gray sweater, small silver earrings, no makeup, no stylist, just the truth. We sat across from each other in a quiet studio, the lights soft and warm. Sarah leaned forward. Margaret, the world knows the headlines. They've read about Brandon, about the case. But what they don't know is the heart of it. Why now? I looked directly into the camera. Because it's not just about me, I said. It's about every parent who gave everything and was thrown away. Every older adult dismissed, erased, or locked up under the excuse of love. I was almost one of them. And I won't be quiet anymore. Then I told my story, the full truth. For the first time that I told Sarah everything. The nursing home, the lottery ticket, the lies I uncovered, and the file I sent. I didn't leave out a single detail. Sarah's eyes welled up as I spoke, but I didn't cry. I was done crying. That night, the interview aired. Millions watched. Messages poured in from across the country as people shared their own stories of betrayal, abandonment, and survival. I wasn't just Margaret anymore. I was a mirror. Brandon didn't speak publicly, but sources close to him said he was devastated that his life was falling apart. Good. He had built that life on manipulation, and now it was collapsing under the weight of his own cruelty. But I didn't gloat. Instead, I focused on the future. I made plans to launch a foundation, one that would protect elders from legal and financial abuse. Not just in name, but with real legal support, genuine funding, and unwavering advocacy. I named it the Margaret Project because if they were going to use my name to strip me of my dignity, I was going to use it to give dignity back. Still, the pain lingered, not because Brandon was suffering, but because I had once loved him with a loyalty that had blinded me. Now, I had to learn how to live without that illusion. But I had something better now, the truth. And no one could take that from me again. Brandon's arrest didn't come with sirens. It came with headlines. Brandon Taylor indicted on multiple counts of wire fraud, identity theft, and tax evasion. I read the news on a quiet morning with my tea in hand and my cat curled beside me. The house was still, except for the steady hum of the refrigerator and the wind brushing against the shutters. For a long time, I just stared at the article, not because I didn't believe it, but because I had imagined this moment so many times that when it finally came, it almost felt like deja vu. He was out on bond, of course. Money can buy time, even when it can't buy peace. But the damage was done. His name had become synonymous with betrayal. Former clients pulled their business. His credit lines were frozen. Friends disappeared. Even his wife had issued a statement through a lawyer. She was filing for divorce. He was alone now. I should have felt triumphant, but all I felt was hollow. The thing about surviving betrayal is that it doesn't leave you whole. It leaves you wiser. Yes, sharper, stronger, maybe. But something soft dies within you, the blind trust, the belief that love is enough to keep someone loyal. I didn't grieve that softness. I buried it. It was a chilly Saturday when I walked into the town center for the first time since the interview aired. People recognized me. They didn't whisper. They didn't stare. They smiled. One woman, maybe in her 40s, touched my arm and said, "You gave my mom the courage to leave a bad situation." A young man behind the pharmacy counter slipped a note into my prescription bag. My grandma says, "Thank you." I didn't seek this attention, but it came gently, like sunlight breaking through heavy clouds. That afternoon, Aaron stopped by. They offered him a deal, he said. 10 years if he pleads guilty. If not, it goes to trial. And I asked, still pretending it was all some misunderstanding. "He thinks he can outsmart the system," Aaron replied. I shook my head. He's been pretending his whole life. Aaron hesitated. "He still hasn't tried to contact you?" I met his eyes, not directly, but I had received something. A letter, unmarked, slid under my front door one evening while I was in the kitchen. Inside, a photograph. It was from my 60th birthday, me in a yellow sweater, laughing with cake on my face. Brandon was beside me. I stared at the photo for hours, not crying, not raging, just remembering. Brandon, holding the knife, laughing too. On the back, just one sentence in his handwriting. You always believed in me. I'm sorry that wasn't enough. The weight of those words sank in slowly. I sat there, surrounded by the warmth of the fire, letting the memories flow. I thought about the boy who asked for one more bedtime story, the teenager who drove my car into a mailbox and cried when I didn't yell, and the man who hugged me tighter than usual the day his father died. Each of those moments was a part of him, and I loved them all. But love, true love, demands truth. And Brandon chose lies. That night, I burned the photo in the fireplace. Not out of hate, but out of release. I watched the flames curl around the paper, blacken the edges, and erase the smile. I didn't need a picture to remember. What I needed was peace. And I was almost there. The next morning, I returned to Willow Pines. The sky was pale gray, the kind of gray that softens the world without hiding it. I stood outside the facility for a long moment, staring at the very place where I had been left like luggage. The parking lot was quiet. The trees were bare, but something had changed. The front doors opened, and Ruby stepped out before I could knock. She gasped when she saw me. Oh my God, Margaret. I smiled. It's me. We hugged, no polite, brief hug, but the kind of embrace shared by two people who had both survived something. Her arms were warm, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I realized how long it had been since I had felt safe in someone's embrace. Inside, everything felt different. The floors were freshly waxed, the lights brighter. The common room had new books, a better television, and real coffee brewing in the corner. I heard what you did, Ruby said, leading me to a quiet bench in the hallway. The donations, the interviews. Margaret, you changed everything. No, I replied softly. I just stopped letting people decide who I was. We walked through the halls together. I visited Doris's old room, now turned into a reading lounge. The staff looked up, some smiling, some stunned. A few residents recognized me. I nodded to each of them. They weren't invisible anymore, and neither was I. That afternoon, I gave a speech in the new activities room. There were folding chairs set up, and the staff had made cookies. Ruby introduced me like I was someone famous, but I shook my head. I'm not here because I'm rich, I began. I'm not here because I was wronged. I'm here because I was silenced. And I know how many of you still feel that way. Every pair of eyes in the room watched me. Some welled up with tears. I continued. I want to tell you something I wish someone had told me a long time ago. You are not a burden. You are not forgotten. And you are not finished. Applause followed. Soft at first, then louder. I smiled, feeling the weight of every lonely night I had ever spent, now replaced by something warmer, something full. When I returned home, I finalized the trust. The Margaret Project would become a national organization, offering legal and financial advocacy for elders at risk of exploitation. We would hire attorneys, launch hotlines, and build partnerships with senior care facilities and courts. As for Brandon, he took the deal, 10 years. He tried to send another letter. I returned it unopened. That chapter was closed. I spent the final days of the year writing letters to every person who helped me. Aaron, Ruby, even Dr. Levine. I thanked them not for saving me, but for standing beside me while I saved myself. Then, on the first snow of January, I did something I hadn't done in decades. I wrote a letter to myself. It was short, just one page. I read it aloud as I sat by the fireplace, the cat curled at my feet. Dear Margaret, you weren't crazy. You weren't too trusting. You weren't weak. You were just a woman who loved too deeply. And when they tried to write you out of your own life, you picked up the pen and wrote the ending yourself. I am so proud of you. With love, yourself. I folded the letter, placed it in a small wooden box, and set it on the mantel. I didn't need a legacy of money or revenge, or even justice. I had something greater, freedom. And for the first time in my life, I was finally, fully, completely free. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters,